Hey there, fifth graders. Today we're going to go ahead and take a look at some more challenging subtracting mixed numbers problems. In these problems, we're going to need to use our regrouping skills. So sometimes the fraction that we're trying to take away is larger or greater than the fraction that we're trying to take away from. When this is the case, we need to use regrouping. So let's talk about just regrouping in general. This is not a new idea to you. Let's talk about with whole numbers. So remember, to regroup with subtraction is to quote unquote borrow from another place value, but you're keeping the value the same. So for instance, if I were to set this up vertically, this would be 25 minus 6. We start in our ones digit and we realize, okay, I can't take 6 from 5 because I don't have enough. So what I do is I go next door and I'm going to borrow a set of 10. And when I bring that 10 over, I'm bringing that over in the form of 10 ones. So in order to take 6 ones from 5 ones, we need to borrow a set of 10 because that's your tens place value. And you bring it over in the form of 10 ones. So then this becomes 1 in your tens column, 15 in your ones column, and you subtract 6. So 15 minus 6 gives you 9. The 1 minus nothing gives you 19. Now that's really broken down step by step. And of course, we don't normally write our numbers like this, but that ended up giving us, we had 5 ones, we added 10 more ones, so that gives you 15 ones. So we're going to use the same idea of borrowing a number and bringing it over in its equivalent form because I did not lose my 10. One set of 10 is equal to 10 ones. So I kept that value the same. So let's take a look at when we're dealing with fractions. So when we are dealing with fractions, to borrow 1 from the whole number means you're going to bring it over in the form of a fraction. And remember, we have a whole slew of versions of 1. So 1 is equivalent to 2 halves. It's equivalent to 3/3. It's equivalent to 4 quarters, to 5/5, 6/6, 99 99ths. And you can create any number you want. Let's say 792 over 792. There is an infinite amount of versions of 1. It's any number over itself, which you're already aware of. So we're going to use this fact. This is actually really important because when we bring our one thing over, we're going to bring it in the form of one of these guys. So let's take a look at an example to start making sense out of all of this. So we have 3 1/4 minus 2 3/4. So here I'm going to start in my fractions column, okay? And I'm going to try and take 3/4 from 1/4. We can't take 3/4 from 1/4. So what we're going to do is we are going to borrow 1 from our whole numbers. So let's go ahead and model what's going on here. So we have 3 whole things. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and split all of them up into quarters because this problem is dealing with quarters. Okay, so 3 whole things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 is equivalent to 12 quarters, which we already know, and 1 additional quarter. And let's take a look at 2 3/4. Again, I'm going to go ahead and split everything up into quarters. 2 3/4 is going to be 2 whole things and 3/4. So we cannot, again, I'm trying to take 3/4 away from 1/4. I do not have enough. So what we're going to do is we are going to borrow, we are going to regroup, and we're going to take one of these whole things and we are going to just bring it over to our fractions column, okay? Because this one thing, I can shift anywhere I want as long as I keep the value equivalent to itself, as long as I keep it as one whole thing. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw that it's over here now. Okay, so that's 1, 2. So there's my whole thing. I shifted it over. So we're no longer going to think about it as over here. It's over here now. So now our number is essentially 2 5/4. And some of you might be like, well, 5/4, that's improper, and that's 1 1/4. And think, if you add 2 and 1 1/4, we still have the value 3 1/4. But now what I can do is I can go ahead and do my subtraction. I now can indeed, I now can indeed take 3/4 away from these amount of quarters, from my 5/4. So 3/4, if I'm going to get rid of 3/4, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get rid of 1, 2, 3 of these. We're getting rid of. Okay, we're exiting out. We're getting rid of those 3/4. 1, 2, 3. And we are left with 2/4. And with my whole numbers, now that's gone because we shifted that over, so we're going to ignore that. I need to take 2 whole things away from 2 whole things. I am left with 0 and 2/4, and that is our answer. So let's do another example to make some more sense out of this. Okay. In this example, we've got 4 1/3 minus 1 2/3. So if we take a look in our fraction column, if we were just to try and subtract right off the bat, we cannot take 2/3 away from 1/3. We can't take 2/3 from 1/3. So this is where we need to use our borrowing skills, and we're just going to shift one of our whole things over so that we do have enough thirds to be able to take the 2/3 away. So we're going to go ahead and we're creating thirds. That's going to be 2 cuts, create thirds. Okay, and I've got 1, 2, 3. I'm going to shade all these guys in. And then I have 1/3 here, and I'm taking away, I'm going to end up taking away 1 whole thing and 2/3. So I'm going to take away 1 whole thing and 2/3. So again, here's our problem, is that I can't take away 2/3 because I only have 1/3. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one of our whole things, and we're going to bring it on over to the fraction column. So this is now going to live over here. So I'm still dealing with, okay, when we look at the total shaded portions, okay, now this I'm going to go ahead and cross out because I'm just shifting it over. It now lives right over here. So now I still have, if you take a look, I still have 1, 2, 3, I still have 4 whole things and 1/3. So I still have 4 1/3. But this is helpful now because I can now take away 2 of these thirds. So let's go ahead and do that. So we need to get rid of 2 of these thirds. 1, 2. 2/3 are gone. Let me do that in a different color. That's 1/3, that's 2/3 gone, and I'm left with 2/3, okay? And I need to take 1 whole thing away from these 3 whole things that we were left with. So we were left with this, okay? We need to take 1 whole thing away, and we are left with 2 whole things. Your answer is 2 2/3. So we're using models right now. We're going to take a look at algebraically how we can do this where we won't have to continue drawing pictures. But let's do one more example for ourselves. So we've got 3 2/8 minus 1 3/8. So we're going to be creating eighths. Let's go ahead. We'll create quarters and then cut it in half. We'll create quarters and cut it in half. Okay. Let's see. 2/8, 1, 2, and this is going to be 3/8. Okay, I have 3 whole things, and here I've got 1 whole thing. So I need to take 3/8 away from this. So we need to take, away 3/8. We do not have enough. Unfortunately, we don't have enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these whole things, and we're simply going to shift it over to our fraction column, okay? So it's no longer going to live in our whole number column. It's going to now live in our fraction column. And when I bring it over, I will bring it over in the form of 8/8. Because now I have 3/8 that I can take away. So now I'm going to get rid of 1, 2, 3 of these. And again, let me do that in a different color. So I'm getting rid of 1, 2, 3. And we are left with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7/8. Now again, that was gone. This guy is gone. We're not looking at this anymore. So now I have 2 whole things minus 1 whole thing. I get rid of one of my whole things, and I am left with 1 and 7/8, which is your answer. Tomorrow, we're going to take a look at how we can do this without drawing pictures, but I really want you to have a good idea of sound foundation of what we're doing. How all we're doing is we're just reorganizing. We're bringing our one whole thing over in the form of our fraction, which was in this case 8/8. Okay, so we just brought it over as 8/8, and by doing so, we then were able to take away the 3/8 like we needed to.